Well, we all know there's some teams from last year that could miss the playoffs, and there's some teams that missed the playoffs last year that could be a lock to make the playoffs this upcoming year. Let's rock, and I'll get into the topic. Please be sure to like and subscribe on this video for more all-around sports content. For now, enjoy the video. Let's talk football. All right, what's going on, everyone? My name's Antonio, and welcome back to the All Around Sports Podcast. Now, recently, this topic has been developing in my mind for just this past few minutes because I saw another YouTuber did this, so I wanted to do my take on it. So, today, I'm going to be going over my top five teams that made the playoffs last year that could miss the playoffs this year, and the teams that missed the playoffs this past year that could make the playoffs this year, that could be a lock to make the playoffs this year. So I've debated each one. So for the first one, I have, of course, the Super Bowl teams that played for the right to go to the Super Bowl last year. And I chose out 12 different teams, or I don't know if I'm doing it right. 12 different teams that I put onto a little list here that I have created. So I have debated the teams that I have on that missed the playoffs last year based on what I could see from them. So I chose 12 teams. I'll show them up here in just a bit. But before we get started, if you guys do enjoy this video, please be sure to smash that like button down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Also, I am close to hitting 375 subscribers before the beginning of the NFL season. I'm only 26 subscribers away. So remember, it's free. So be sure to like and subscribe. And I will be doing two games on week one's Sunday afternoon game and morning games. I'll be doing the Steelers and the Falcons and the Broncos versus the Seahawks, which obviously I'm a Seahawks fan, so they're obviously one of the teams in the non-playoff picture. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So first up, I'm going to start off with the first team that could likely miss the playoffs this upcoming year. So the teams that made the playoffs last year, to recap, was the one seeds for each division was the Ravens and Niners. And then followed by other teams of the AFC like the Cleveland Browns, Texans, Dolphins, Chiefs, Steelers, and Buffalo Bills. And then the NFC side had teams like the Eagles, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Los Angeles Rams, Detroit Lions, Green Bay Packers, and Dallas Cowboys. So the first team I have that could miss the playoffs this upcoming year is, of course, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the Cowboys. This one is a big time high possibility because the Cowboys, they looked more all out than they were all in. But other than that, this team is just beyond outmatched in this conference because the Dallas Cowboys, the fact is they just don't know how to win. They just don't know how to go all in for some dang reason. But anyways, this Cowboys team is just atrocious. They lost a lot of weapons. They lost guys like Tyron Smith. They also lost Tony Pollard, Michael Gallup, Jonathan Hankins, Derek Armstrong, Vander Esch, and Stephon Gilmore. But they got a few new pieces, which Zeke's probably going to play as center again, as he did in the Niners game. But other than that, the Cowboys are the first team to highly miss the playoffs that made the playoffs from last year. Now moving over to the teams from last year that didn't make the playoffs this past season. So I put in 12 teams to kind of give people an idea of what my ideal picture is. So the teams I have in the race in my eyes, are, of course, my team, the Seattle Seahawks, the Los Angeles Chargers, Arizona Cardinals, the Vikings, the Colts, the Jags, the Raiders, the Falcons, the Bears, the Saints, Bengals, and the Jets. But for the first lock that could make the playoffs this year, and I have a lot of faith in this team. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I know I'm kind of going off what this YouTuber said, but it is true. They could have a high possibility of getting back to the playoffs because they got a new revamped squad from what they had last year. They had a load of weapons. They got guys like Gabe Davis. They got guys on offense like Brian Thomas Jr., Eric Evan Ingram. They got also along with um, Christian Kirk and Travis Etienne. Also, they went out there and got Eric Armstead from the 49ers, which I was surprised that the 49ers actually let go of this young man. But that's just my opinion. But the Jags, they are one of the top teams of the NFL this year. So I see them being one of the four teams from last year that could be a lock to make the playoffs. Back to the teams that made the playoffs last year. Another team I have from last year that made the playoffs, that could miss the playoffs this year, is the Los Angeles Rams. Now, even though the Rams are relatively still good, I know people are going to probably get on me saying that I'm a Seahawks fan. I'm being biased. I'm not. I'm going by this what happened this offseason. Even though they made great moves, even though they made a lot of great moves, they lost Aaron Donald.
And it cost him. No! That 15-yard line. He's not happy about being escorted out of the stadium.
And that, I think, is going to be a little bit of growing pain for the Los Angeles Rams. I believe that's going to be a little bit of a growing pain for them. This is going to be a very difficult year for the Rams because even though they got out there and got Jared Verse, Brendan Fisk, and Cameron Kitchens on defense in the draft, also along with getting in Tre'Davious White, and going out there and getting Blake Corum, which I do see to be a sleeper, it all depends on how Matthew Stafford's going to play. Now, I know Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are really good, but if we look at the NFC, they got one of the hardest schedules right now. They got to go against every team from the NFC North, including the Bears, Vikings, Lions, and Packers, and then also having to play their division rivals, the Seahawks and the Niners, at least twice. This is going to be a high difficult task for them. So I just don't see that the Rams could make the playoffs, but I would not be surprised if I was wrong because they're a thorn in both the Niners and Seahawks side. Now, back to the teams that did make the playoffs last year. The next team that I have on here is I cannot believe I'm about to say this. I cannot believe I'm about to say this coming out of my mouth. It's the New York Jets. I hate to say it coming out of my mouth because I still think this team is being overhyped. The fact is, they got Aaron Rodgers, the bad man. I've I've just not been a believer yet, but there's a high possibility they could because Aaron Rodgers is there, although he hasn't had an MVP type season since the year of 2020 when they made the NFC Championship game. The defense is the primary reason. It's not all about just Aaron Rodgers of why I have the team in the picture. It's because of their defense. Their defense has been almost top 10 in every single category. They have been able to compete very well with some teams within their division. They've been able to keep Josh Allen intact. They've been able to get to him when necessary in that week one matchup when Aaron Rodgers went down. And if Aaron Rodgers can survive more than 4 snaps this time, then I could be a believer if I do see something good from him. But I do see this team having a lock, even though I might soon possibly regret it. But the next team from the teams that made the playoffs last year, Now, I know a lot of people are going to give me a little bit of heck on this because I've been giving this team a lot of heck lately. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers, I just don't see it because the fact is the Steelers have one of the hardest schedules in the NFL, as I had stated in my video of where I went over on their ways on how to avoid a losing season. If we look at their schedule, they got to play teams like the Falcons, the Broncos, the Chargers. They got to play the Colts, the Cowboys, the Jets. They got to play loads of hard teams, especially in that 8-game gauntlet where you got to face the Ravens, Browns, Bengals, Browns in that order, then the Eagles, then the Ravens, then the Chiefs, and then top it off with the Bengals. And the Steelers are probably right now regretting their decision of going after Russell Wilson and Justin Fields after on so far of how they performed in the preseason. But as I'm currently recording this, this is before the preseason game that the Steelers have against the Detroit Lions. So I'll, of course, be doing a reaction to that, maybe, if the Steelers do, as a matter of fact, lose. But other than that, the defense still is relatively good, but I just don't see a scenario that they're going to escape with a winning record. They're hard. Their schedule is one of the hardest in the league. So I just don't see it yet coming from the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is why I have them as one of the teams missing the playoffs this upcoming year. Next up in the non-playoff team category is none other than my team, the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the Seahawks. This team I have a lot of faith in. Now, I know people are going to get on me saying that probably I'm biased, but I'm not being biased. I'm going by the stats. Let me go over why I have this team as a playoff team. During the last 2 years, what has been their record? 9-8. Who has been their quarterback in that span? Geno Smith. And now they got rid of Pete Carroll, who is somewhat still there. But they went out there and got one of the best head coaching candidates available, which is Mike Macdonald. I'm very excited about because Mike Macdonald is that defensive piece that we have been needing. Because the only reason that he came to Seattle was because of what he did to the San Francisco 49ers on Christmas Day, where they looked like the Grinch stealing Christmas, of course. But other than that, this is a huge, big time, big move. Now, of course, they made two recent moves that I touched on in a video I made earlier today, which I touched on. But Michael Barrett is going to be a young stud for this defense. But this is going to be a great year for the Seahawks because so many people are underestimating them. And let me flash back to something. So, and this was before the season that Russell Wilson got traded, was before I became a YouTuber. What were people saying of the Seahawks? Some people had them going 5-12. Some people had them going 4-13. Some people had them going 3-14. And some teams had them going 0-17, which is atrocious. What did they end up doing? They ended up going 9-8 for the last 2 years. And remember, the same thing was going on with the Rams. They were being talked about as the worst team because the fact is, when the Seahawks are being said to be absolutely terrible, they're really good. And when they're said to be really good, they do terrible. They're kind of like the Rams because you just don't know with this team. You just don't know. And with an offense that has DK Metcalf, JSN, and Tyler Lockett, along with runners like K9, who I've had a lot of faith in since he got drafted, Charbonnet, Fant, also along with AJ Barner, Westover, and a few of the O linemen on this playing field, and the fact that their defense is going to get better, I have a lot of faith in this team. I got a lot of faith. So we'll, of course, wait and see what happens, but the Seahawks I have as one of the teams in the playoff picture. So the next team that I have missing the playoffs from last year's playoff. Now, some people might argue with me on this because this team is, out of all the teams that have been disrespected of division winners, this team is probably the most disrespected of all of them. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I know people are going to get on me about this, but the fact is we've still not fully seen what the Buccaneers are capable of. Although I do have a lot of faith in them, the Baker Mayfield is still a huge question mark. We don't know if he's going to come back with the same stats that he had last year. And the fact is that the Buccaneers, they play in the easiest division possible, which I'll touch on one of their rivals in just a sec. But this is going to be a very hard year for the Buccaneers because they've lost a few pieces in free agency and some due to retirement. But the Buccaneers, I got missing the playoffs, but I'll not be surprised if I was wrong. And then the next team I have to make the playoffs that didn't last year is the other team of the NFC South, the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons. This one is a relatively interesting situation because I originally had them losing their division to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but I've swapped it around because of the moves that the Falcons have recently made. They not only got Matthew Judon in a trade with the Patriots that really wanted out of New England because it's legitimately a swamp. But they also got out there and got Justin Simmons. Now you add him up with Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons on the same secondary, two safeties that are very highly underrated. This is going to be a scary Falcons team. This team is going to be scary. So the Falcons, there are still a lot of questions around their quarterback room, especially since they took Michael Penix Jr. in the first round for some reason. I mean, I still don't understand that. But the fact is, they are still one of the more dangerous teams of the NFC South. And I have a lot more faith in them than I do have with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints. So that is why I have the Falcons as another one of the playoff teams that could be in the playoffs this upcoming year. But the last team that I could have missing the playoffs from last year's playoffs, and I hate to do this to this team because I had them in the playoff picture from my playoff picture prediction video that I did recently. I hate to do this, but the Buffalo Bills. I hate to say it, but it looks like it's highly possible. Because even though the Bills are such a good team, I hate to do this because I have massive respect for the Bills, unlike some other teams, like the Dolphins. But I just have so much respect. I hate to do this to them, but it's highly likely because Josh Allen has had his woes before he had Stephon Diggs. He has to mature, and I believe he will, just not this year, because this is going to be a very difficult year for the Buffalo Bills. They got to rebound. They have got to try to rebound. Their defense lost a lot of veteran key guys on their veteran side, like Jordan Poyer, also along with Micah Hyde, who is still a free agent as of right now. Tre'Davious White, you also lost loads of other pieces. You still got Von Miller, but you lost Gabe Davis and also along with Stephon Diggs. But the Bills, I hate to do this, but I just don't see a way that they're going to make the playoffs. That now I'm hoping I'm wrong because I did have this team in the picture. So I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I have to say it for right now. But the last team that I have sneaking into the playoff picture from the teams of last year. Now, I've been debating between three teams that I have on here: the Colts, Raiders, and Browns. I mean, not Browns, Bears. This has been a very hard decision for me because all of these three I see being relatively good teams. But in the end, I'm going to go with the Indianapolis Colts. Now, why I say this is because of Anthony Richardson. Now, I've been saying that the Raiders could be a sleeper team because of what they have done in the offseason. I still have some questions about their quarterback room. The Bears, we don't know if Caleb Williams is going to be that number one pick that everyone thinks he is because we already know what happened to Bryce Young last year. Who knows if we don't see that again? But the Colts, we look around their roster, they are dangerous. The Colts, this team is highly one of the most underrated teams of the AFC because this team has a defense that is hard hitting, that can pound your skull to a billion pieces because that's how good they are. You got DeForest Buckner, you got Latia Latu from the draft, you got guys on the whole secondary side of things that are just absolute ball hawks. And you got an offense that is stacked top to bottom. You brought in Adonai Mitchell. You brought in guys also along with Jonathan Taylor, who is still there. You brought back Michael Pittman Jr. You re-signed a lot of guys that were already there in the first place, that were there last year. But if this team is going to make the playoffs, they got to solely rely on the health of Anthony Richardson. I do see a lot of hope coming from this young man. I do see a lot of faith coming from this man because he is easily, if not arguably, one of the greatest young quarterbacks in the game. Now, I originally had the Colts losing to the Jaguars in week 1 of last year. I had that right. But I was not expecting it to be as close as it was. I was not expecting it to be as close as it was. So that is why I have the Colts as a team that can make the playoffs as of this upcoming year. But to recap the whole list for the teams that from last year's playoffs that have missing the playoffs are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Los Angeles Rams, Cowboys, Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Buffalo Bills. As for the teams that I have making the playoffs from last that missed it last year, the Seahawks, the Colts, the Jags, the Falcons, and the Jets. Let me know in the comments what you guys think down in the comment section below of each of these predictions. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to smash that like button down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. But for now, I'll catch you all in the next one. Ciao for now.